Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear friends. Thank you, Mr. Donfried. It's indeed a great pleasure for me to be yet once again here at the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy to deal with such an important topic. Last November, we have celebrated here the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, a landmark point in modern history. Neither Germany, neither the EU, neither the whole world would be the same after the 9th of November, 1989. 20 years later, the international scene seems more peaceful, but also more complex. From the bilateral Cold War era to the unilateral moment of the US predominance, a turbulent international change with the emergence of new centers of power across the globe is currently taking place. The quest for a leading role within the new multilateral international system is the EU's ultimate challenge. The European Union must be an effective global actor, ready to share in the responsibility for global security and take the lead in the definition of joint responses in common challenges, as the EU leaders declared last September in Brussels. Looking to the past, the European Union started off as a project of enhancing the interdependence of a group of countries so as to discourage them from ever going to war again. The great benefits from cooperation were soon made evident, and cooperation and interdependence multiplied, so did the number of members. In less than 60 years, the EU has expanded from a 6-member cooperation in the coal and steel sector into a 27-member union of states that cooperate and collectively decide on a number of issues in a very wide range of sectors. However, during the past few decades, the world itself has become more and more integrated and interdependent, not only economically, but also in the sense that global problems have now come to light, or if they have always existed, at least now we are much more aware of them and their global implications. Specifically because they are global, they require global cooperation in order to be put right. Climate change, the economic and financial crisis, pandemics, the fight against poverty, against nuclear proliferation, the rise of terrorism and piracy in international waters are only some cases in point. All these challenges require a concerted international response. Especially the economic and financial crisis has dramatically shown the extent to which the well-being, security, and quality of life of Europeans, and indeed for the citizens of the entire world, depend on external developments. We are all now at the same boat of globalization, and we have to find common answers to all these problems. The economic and financial crisis, beyond its direct consequences, has consolidated in the clearest way a change undergoing since the beginning of the 21st century. The global economic and geopolitical map is radically changing. The triad of US, EU, and Japan is relatively losing its importance vis-à-vis new economical and political powers becoming global actors, especially the so-called BRIC countries, namely Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Indeed, the influence of the emerging economies on world affairs is steadily growing. They have great economic potential, accounting for 25% of the world economy, comprising 42% of the global population and 26% of world landmass. An interesting study of Notre Europe, a Paris-based think tank, is arguing that this trend is ascending, in particular in Asia's favor. It is expected that on 2025, the OECD countries will produce no more than 40% of the world's GDP from the 55% they produce today. The IMF expects that already by 2013, the combined GDP of the emerging and developing economies will surpass, for the first time in history, the combined GDP of the advanced world. On the demographic map, the change is even more impressive. In 15 years from now, the population, the combined population of the European Union and the United States will represent no more than 9% of the world's population. The above are clearly demonstrating that the world's gravity center is steadily shifting from the West towards the East. Indeed, the epicenter for peace and security in the world has shifted already from the North Atlantic, as it used to be during the Second World War and the Cold War, to somewhere in the Indian Ocean, with a range touching from Somalia, Sudan, the Middle East, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Southeast Asia. Simply inconceivable some years ago, the Western predominance is fading with an incredible fast pace. The new emerging powers, especially China and India, are now as important as the traditional developed countries of the West for addressing the planet's political, economic, and ecologic stability. But multipolarity is not a merit of its own. It will not automatically lead to perpetual peace and stability. It might also lead to new balances of terror and even conflicts if the principles of collectiveness, cooperation, and consensus are not shared by all parts. In this respect, it is important to stress that no one should see the emerging powers as a homogeneous bloc. On the one hand, they might have common interests, such as the expansion of the South-South trade, the continuous inflows of foreign direct investment, investing in each other's economies and their demands for a greater voice and large role in international institutions. Only recently, IMF increased the presentation of these countries by 6%. But on the other, there is a growing rivalry among them in certain global economic and political affairs due to their different national interests, China and India, for example. In this respect, the Copenhagen Summit on Climate Change was a negative example in every sense. The big participants put in front the specific interests and hence revealed their particular and utterly diverging visions of globalization and multipolarity. On the contrary, the EU and Japan, which are defending ambitious and demanding positions towards climate change, have been marginalized. Copenhagen is a lesson to learn for all participants, but specifically for the Europeans, as it marks an alarming sign of the new era. If the EU aspires to play a leading role in the new globalized interdependent world, it should upgrade its effectiveness on its external relations with its traditional allies and with the new emerging powers. To engage with these global actors, the EU has created a new instrument, the strategic partnerships. Strategic partnership is a political term to describe the importance and the breadth of a relationship. The EU has established strategic partnerships with the United States of America, the Russian Federation, Japan, Canada, India, China, Brazil, and Mexico. For all the reasons I have underlined before, the emergence of Asia is of global significance. Getting EU relations right with the diverse and dynamic region is one of the major challenges facing Europe. We are deepening our strategic partnerships with China, India, and Japan, and negotiations are well underway on new partnership and free trade agreements with South Korea and with Southeast Asian countries. Regular and wide-ranging dialogue takes place, leading increasingly to cooperation and convergence on global issues, regional security questions, as well as regulatory policy and other economic issues. Asia comprises high-income industrialized partners and dynamic emerging economies, but is also home to 2/3 of the world's poorest citizens. The rise of the People's Republic of China and its integration into the international system is arguably the most important trend in global politics. China has recently become the second world's economy, removing Japan and replacing Germany as first world exporter. In fact, if we combine, as we should from now on, the economy of the EU, of the member states of the EU, then the EU is the first economy in the world, with second the United States and third China. Today, the EU is China's largest trade partner, with China being the EU's second largest partner. In 2009, the EU still imported 215 billion euro worth of goods from China. Europe's trade deficit, including services, in 2009 was 128 billion euros. But the deficit still reflects the considerable problems EU business have accessing the Chinese markets. Intellectual property rights infringement remains a huge problem for European business in China. Almost 54% of all counterfeit goods seized at European borders in 2008 came from China. The EU endeavors to broaden and deepen the dialogue with China, both bilaterally and on the world stage. We support China's transition to an open society based upon the rule of law and respect for human rights. We encourage the ongoing integration of China into the world's economy and trading system and support the process of economic and social reforms. And we raise the EU's profile in China to aid mutual understanding. The European Parliament is holding regular contacts with representatives of the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party. In this framework, I paid a 5-day visit to Beijing and Shanghai last week with the European People's Party Group Presidency, and we had a series of meetings with Chinese officials on all matters of mutual interest and cooperation. In order to effectively master the great challenges of our time, close cooperation with China is an absolute necessity. While China deserves to benefit from economic growth and increasing wealth, as one of the world's major economies and the most populous country, it also has to fulfill its obligations to its own people and to the world as a whole. More improvements in terms of respect for human rights, a moratorium on death penalty, combat against climate change, and democratization are thus needed. We salute the ongoing rapprochement with Taiwan, but furthermore, China must play a more active role in the peaceful resolutions of this situation in countries like North Korea, Burma, and Sudan. Additionally, China should play a more constructive role in the framework of the negotiations about the Iranian nuclear program. India is another important strategic partner of the EU in the region. Being the largest democracy worldwide and an economic heavyweight, and about 60 years after its independence from Great Britain in 1947, India has become a true global player. The growth of the country has been largely linked to the era of globalization and to the increased relevance of the information technology sector. India nowadays is a key player in all global issues, such as climate change, the Doha Round, combat against terrorism, and financial regulation. It has been a strong supporter of multilateralism and is aspiring a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. Its relations with its neighbors, China and Pakistan, are historically charged. As a consequence, India has always had a large military and has acquired a nuclear weapon without having ratified until today the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Besides, despite the recent growth, India is still faced by many challenges, such as caste discrimination, poverty, illiteracy, corruption, and malnutrition. The European Union and the Republic of India benefit from a long-standing relationship, which includes a broad political dialogue, which evolves through annual summits, regular ministerial and expert-level meetings. India became one of the EU's strategic partners in 2004. An effort is made to realize the full potential of this partnership in key areas of interest, such as trade relations, actions against climate change, and the reform of the UN and the international financial institutions. Japan, being one of the strongest economic performers worldwide and being one of the major Asian democracies, is indeed one of the key global players and a regional heavyweight in Asia. Since the defeat in World War II, Japan has followed a consecutive path of democratization, economic development, and support for human rights. Due to the very complicated geopolitical situation after World War II, Japan's relations with its neighbors continue to be historically challenged. As the only country to have suffered from nuclear attacks, Japan has a special moral interest in the abolishment and reduction of nuclear arms worldwide. In this context, Japan is a strong supporter of multilateralism and is striving to gain a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. Japan is now the world's third largest national economy. In 2007, Japan was the EU's fifth largest trading partner. Japan was identified as a strategic partner for the EU in the European Security Strategy of 2003. Bilateral relations are based on four main objectives for cooperation: promoting peace and security, cooperating for greater prosperity, assuming global responsibility, and the bringing together of people and cultures. After the difficult years following the disintegration of the Soviet Union, Russia has regained its position as a global player. Russia's richness in natural resources, notably natural gas, has significantly strengthened its geopolitical significance. Given its strength, Russia is trying to regain lost influence in its neighborhood. But its near-abroad policy, disproportionate to its real capabilities, the events in Georgia have brought clouds and suspicions between the European Union and Russia, in particular among the member states of the EU who were in the past under Soviet Union control. A recent rapprochement between Poland and Russia, an implicit admission by Russia that it gained little in the Georgia adventure, and the sought assistance for the necessary modernization from the EU creates new opportunities of hope. Nevertheless, Russia has engaged in multiple rounds of disarmament together with the United States. Despite its recent progress, Russia continues to be faced by severe challenges such as the global recession, corruption, demographic change, and poverty. Additionally, Russia continues to be the target of separatist terrorist attacks. Given its geostrategic importance, and recalling that it is the largest neighbor of the European Union, Russia is naturally a strategic partner of the European family. Key issues on the agenda are energy security, respect for human rights, and the combat against terrorism. Since 2003, the EU and Russia have further reinforced their cooperation by identifying 4 common spaces of long-term cooperation. Additionally, due to its historic role, Russia continues to be a key partner when it comes to the future of the Caucasus, and in particular, the Western Balkans. One serious issue is the security of energy supply. This issue became very serious following the events of turning off the tap of the pipelines of natural gas twice in 2 consecutive years in Ukraine. This had as a result that many countries in Central and Eastern Europe remained without central heating in the middle of very cold winters. The lessons to be drawn are the following. The European Union has to persist on the diversification of the routes of energy supply, the Southern Corridor, the Nabucco, Northern Stream, Southern Stream. The solidarity of member states by creating a network of interconnectedness between the different routes of supply, and mainly an agreement with Russia that energy supply should never be used as a geostrategic weapon, and that Russia will be guaranteed a security of demand, and Europe should be guaranteed of a security of supply. Given the close historical, cultural, and economic ties with Russia, the joint partnerships has vast opportunities and needs to be further deepened, since a true EU-Russian partnership would greatly strengthen the European voice in the world. It is obvious that Russia still has a long way to go, particularly in terms of respect for human rights, democratization, and the rule of law. It is in the interest of both sides that the EU supports and encourages such a reform process in Russia. As a key regional player and global actor, Brazil is since 2007 another strategic partner of the EU. Since both the EU and Brazil have identical views on the promotion of democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and market economy, Brazil is one of the key partners for the EU to deal and address the imminent global issues such as globalization, climate change, and energy security. Relations should still be further intensified in order to establish a truly far-reaching partnership. The first ever EU-Brazil summit was held in Lisbon in July 2007. The last took place in July 2010. Central topics of the new partnership include effective multilateralism, climate change, sustainable energy, the fight against poverty, the Mercosur's integration process, and Latin America's stability and prosperity. One very important topic in the context of discussions about climate change is the case of deforestation of the Amazon. We all know how much important role the Amazon plays for the whole humanity in absorbing the emissions of CO2, encouragement, economic assistance, and alternative economic activities must be agreed with Brazil to curtail, if not stop, the process of deforestation. This new relationship places Brazil, the Mercosur region, and South America high in the European Union's political map. Dear friends, I have kept, in the last part of my intervention, the EU-US strategic partnership, because this is not only a strategic partnership, it's also an alliance. Following the Iraq crisis and the transatlantic divisions it caused, divisions which also existed within the Union, relations between the European Union and the United States are now in a much more open and relaxed phase. This is also due to the conciliatory spirit brought about by the Obama presidency. While the European Union remains the first commercial power in the world, and the US continues to be the first commercial partner of the EU, our cooperation is much more than that. It is a core element of the international system, as it is based on common values, historic ties, and strategic interest, which with regard to other strategic partners is not always the case. The transatlantic partnership, from an alliance of necessity in the Cold War era, has evolved to an alliance of choice. The common threat from the Soviet Union during the Cold War was creating some automaticity in the EU-US relations. The emergence of a multipolar world dictates the need for a new definition of modalities for cooperation between the two sides for all existing bilateral and global issues. And the important question is, will the EU and the US seek to defend the Western interests in the multipolar world, or will they as well defend a universal power sharing among the emerging powers, and thus a systematic designation of the collective interest of them all? The future developments shall give the answer to this question. But for the time being, the present circumstance call for fresh impetus to be given to the transatlantic relationship and for renewed reflection on ways of creating a true partnership based on our respective strengths and specificities. And this is a quotation of the declaration of the European Union Summit last September in Brussels. Based on a good understanding of our mutual interests and respective contributions, the transatlantic partnership should concentrate on maximizing the potential benefits of our economic relationship, on working more closely on major international issues, and on confronting global economic and security challenges together in a concerted manner. In this connection, the EU-NATO cooperation should be further advanced in accordance with the UN Charter, the principle of full inclusiveness of all member countries, and with due respect to the decision-making autonomy of both organizations. The new strategic concept of NATO for the next decade, which is expected to be approved at the forthcoming NATO summit, will take into account this new reality. Without downplaying the differences in their approaches, the European Union and the United States have everything to gain by a partnership that allows them to address all issues in order to spread stability around the world. Dear friends, in the new era of globalization, interdependence, and multipolarity, the EU has to be on the forefront. In accordance with the Lisbon Treaty and in line with the European security strategy, the European Union and its member states must act more strategically so as to bring Europe's true weight to bear internationally. This requires a clear definition of its strategic interests and objectives, and a given moment and focused reflection on the means to pursue them more assertively. The European Union, as a normative power, can draw on its firmly rooted belief in effective multilateralism, especially the role of the UN, universal values, an open world economy, and on its unique range of instruments. The European Union strategic partnerships with key players in the world provide such an instrument for pursuing European objectives and interests. This will only work if these partnerships are two-way streets based on mutual interests and benefits, and on the recognition that all actors have rights as well as duties. If handled correctly, the strategic partnerships could be proven to be indeed efficient instruments for a united European foreign policy. This is the ultimate prerequisite for an EU that aspires to be an effective and constructive protagonist in the globalized, interdependent, and multipolar world. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Kasoulides. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Kasoulides, for an excellent speech, and I think having shown us a long to-do list of the work awaiting for the EU around the world. We now have time for a few questions. I'd ask you to please introduce yourself also beforehand, and yes, let's take maybe 2 or 3.
Good morning. Thank you for the speech. I'm Vittorio Maiorana. I come from Italy. I'm a student of law, comparative law, international law. I've got 2 questions. The first one is, well, China is supposed to keep artificially low the value of yuan to increase the volume of exportation. And do you think this may damage the trade pattern, normal trade pattern between China and European Union, as it's damaging the one between China and the US? And the second question, do you think that midterm elections in the US may have repercussions on the relations with European Union or not? Just this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Kasoulides, would it be okay to take a few together?
Please.
I just want to make sure we have as many voices heard as possible. So I'll hand over here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amesha. I study international relations. And I'm sorry if I go into details, but I was really surprised about China is promoting human rights, maybe in Asia, and democracy. And you mentioned North Korea. According to my knowledge, China was the only country who didn't really talk against North Korea after 26th of March, after the attack of the ship, of the South Korean ship. And still, China is one of the few countries who actually negotiated with North Korea. So would you please just comment on that one, how China is playing an important role in Asia? Thank you.
Surely.
Thank you. And is there a third question? Okay.
Hi, my name is Maria. I'm currently enrolled in UCL and I'm doing my master's in politics and security. And I would like you to comment on the transatlantic relationship, and particularly on the fact that America and the EU have different approaches to security, where America relies on hard power and the EU on soft power. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm just taking notes not to forget anything. Okay. Well, first of all, on the issue of the yuan, the renminbi, it is true, and it's a very important issue now to be dealt with at the summit of the G20 in Korea in a few days' time. What actually is the case is that the renminbi, one renminbi, is consistently devalued by China. This is considered as a distortion in the world's monetary order, because it facilitates the exports of Chinese goods, keeping the yuan in a devaluated situation, and it's forming distortions at a fair world competition. On the other hand, China says that it cannot revalue, appreciate its currency suddenly and in a sudden way, and allows to be understood that gradually it will do so. If they do it suddenly, then Chinese industry in a number of, particularly south of China, will face problems. And they are afraid of social unrest with East China, where they are particularly apprehensive. The G20 have managed so far, in a harmonious and in the spirit of cooperation, in a harmonious spirit of cooperation, all the problems that have appeared from the world financial crisis. And so far, they were successful. But I am afraid that the first turbulences have appeared on the horizon to this next coming G20 summit. The last thing that the world would like would be a currency war or measures and countermeasures for protectionism in order to face them. We are urging, and when we were in China, we urged China to do its own bit, to take up her responsibilities like everybody else should do. For instance, I dare say that the decision of the Federal Reserve in the United States to print and pour $600 million into the American economy, it's also a measure that distorts the international monetary order. What is important, it's a very constructive suggestion by the finance minister of the United States, Mr. Geithner, to the G20, that instead of talking about currencies, countries should talk about how to face the budget deficit in the West and the trade surplus in the East, and that everybody should decide with the indicative 4% of the GDP that they should not exist. They should not. That it would remain. It should remain below 4%, either the deficit in the West of the GDP or the surplus at the East, and perhaps this would have been a good solution. Now, the midterm elections, I don't think that they are going to influence in any way the relations between the United States and Europe. The relations between the United States, I'm not saying that they were bad during the Bush administration. They had a different kind of approach and perhaps a more difficult one, and sometimes the European Union was divided, like in the Iraq War. But no, I don't think that this will, in any sense, influence the relations. I have never advocated that China supports human rights or it's a purely democratic country. I just said exactly the opposite. But I think in these kind of relations, precisely a dialogue with China, by making it known that we are not patronizing anybody, that we are on an equal footing, but this dialogue should include democracy, human rights, the Nobel laureate Liu Xiaobo, and so many other issues should come to the frontward and should be able to be discussed and slowly and gradually gain on those issues. On North Korea again, despite the fact that China is the closest, let's say, ally of North Korea, nonetheless, on the issue of the nuclear proliferation and the nuclear bomb by North Korea, China works closely with the, I think it's 5+1, or whatever it is, the dialogue with North Korea, and is trying to, and I think that is playing in its own way a constraining role. Now, I don't think that there is a disagreement in as far as the transatlantic relations are concerned because of the hard or soft power. On the contrary, there is a complementarity, and very important complementarity. Look at Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the new counterinsurgency strategy initiated by General McChrystal and followed by General Petraeus involves both. It involves, on the one hand, the fight against the insurgency, the hard power, but also that once an area is cleared, the army stays there, exposes itself. It creates much more victims than the previous strategy, but it stays there to protect the population. And then the EU civilian forces go in for reconstruction, development, building, administration building, and so forth and so forth. And that's the only way that an exit strategy can be prepared for Afghanistan, to give time to the army and the police, the security forces, Afghan army and security forces, to be in a position to leave Afghanistan without the fear of the Taliban and obscurantism and terrorism, and safe haven for Al-Qaeda comes back. And military victory in Afghanistan, we have to forget it. What is going to happen is this mixture of hard and soft power and the preparation for the Afghanization of the conflict in Afghanistan. Mr. President Mansham wants to ask something.
Final question.
Well, because of Seychelles and Cyprus and their link, I have to.
Mr. Kasoulides, I just wanted to make one comment with respect to the question that one of our young men asked concerning the effect of the midterm elections in the United States vis-à-vis situation in Europe and maybe worldwide. A few days ago, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the United Kingdom, David Miliband, wrote an article that was published by the International Herald Tribune. Now, what Miliband is saying is that whereas the Americans must be left to themselves with respect to the issue of healthcare or the issue of taxation, which was two of the main issues in the mid-election, which saw, if you want, the negative approach towards President Obama. But there was one issue, which is the issue of the opening up with the Muslim world. This was the third issue. And there Miliband says that it would be very unfortunate if the United States doesn't give continuity to this politics of President Obama. Well, as you know, he went to Ankara and he made a statement about l'ouverture, to Cairo, etc. And I must say that I share Miliband's viewpoints in this respect, because there is at the moment within the United States a growing, reckless sort of politics spread by religious fanatics, etc., which doesn't take into account the fact that the Muslim world is a big world and a world of diversity, and that not everybody who's a Muslim is anti-West.
Well, certainly and definitely, but let me say two things. The issues at the mid-term elections in the United States were mostly domestic issues having to do with the difficulties of the economy, the budget deficit, the unemployed, and all these things. And I think that was the mood of the American electorate at the time, was not foreign policy. Secondly, I don't think that the foreign policy will change because of the midterm elections. And that's not the end of the road. In the United States, they have elections every 2 years. This doesn't mean anything for the next presidential elections. We haven't seen nothing yet. But it's up to Mr. Gonfrid to decide whether, because I see that they are asking for the floor again, but it's up to you to decide whether time is up. Well, I'm afraid time is up, perhaps later. Thank you very much. Thank you.